Less than 1 week into the new year, Richmond got slammed with a major snowstorm and a water crisis. Things got pretty ugly. A lot of unbrushed teeth and unflushed toilets. In this video, I'm going to tell you exactly what happened and why our recent water crisis makes me love Richmond even more. I'm Greg Somerville, a real estate agent here in Richmond, Virginia. I have the privilege of helping people from all over the U.S. find their new home in this great city. If there's anything I can do for you, my number's on the screen. Feel free to text or call anytime. Serving my clients well includes making sure they know the truth, the whole truth about Richmond. It's not all music festivals, farmers markets, and craft beers. It's an old city with some old problems, including an aging water system. So pardon the pun, but today we're going to take a deep dive into Richmond's recent water crisis. And if you stay tuned to the end, I think you may just find that the story leaves a good taste in your mouth. Dr. Danny Avula was elected as Richmond's new mayor on November 5th. His swearing-in ceremony and inaugural celebration were scheduled for January 11th, along with a day full of community service events. But on the night of January 5th, a major snowstorm hit Richmond, its biggest snow event in years. And that's when the crisis began. Here's a timeline of exactly what happened, how it affected the city, and why I think it has a silver lining. Monday morning, January 6th. City government was closed because of the weather. Snow had started falling the night before, and 8 to 10 inches were expected before day's end. At 5:50 a.m., electricity went out at the water plant. The city's automatic switch to the backup power supply didn't work. Now, there have been numerous power failures over the years, and the backup supply has always worked. One experienced operator said, "I've been here 25 years. I've never seen it not switch over." But this time it failed. At 7:30 a.m., power was restored after an electrician was called to manually make the switch. The plant's battery backup only lasted for 45 minutes though, which wasn't enough to span this 2-hour gap. Without power, the computer system that controls all plant operations crashed. When staff rebooted it, they weren't able to connect to the servers. Failure of the computer system prevented water valves in the plant from opening, leading to massive flooding that rapidly submerged other critical equipment. The sump pump was not able to keep up with the flooding. Mayor Danny Avula was told about power issues at the plant that morning, but did not get a formal briefing on the scope of the emergency until 1 p.m. For the next few hours, city officials coordinated with the surrounding counties and other agencies. Meanwhile, residents in the Fan District and other parts of the city were experiencing a drop in water pressure. At 4:30 p.m., the city imposed a boil water advisory. This was a precautionary measure. There was no evidence that water flowing out of the treatment plant was contaminated. In fact, the last time the city had given a boil advisory was in 2003 after Hurricane Isabel. More city residents lost water over the course of the afternoon and evening. Service was supposed to be restored by 10 p.m. that night, but it wasn't. Tuesday, January 7th. Residents woke up to widespread reports on social media that most city neighborhoods were out of water. Of the 8 pumps that push water into the city system, only 1 began to function that morning. The city opened 10 water distribution centers with limited twice-a-day hours, but water was slow to arrive and it ran out quickly. At noon, city officials said that water services had been restored, but an electrical panel malfunction that afternoon led to an additional round of flooding and again shut down the plant's computer system. To make things worse, the Bird Park Reservoir was undergoing renovation, so only half the normal water capacity was available. In his news conference that afternoon, Mayor Avula explained that the reservoir needed to reach a level of 10 feet before water pressure could return to area homes. It was only at 9 feet that night. Wednesday, January 8th. Water began trickling back into parts of Richmond early Wednesday morning. 12 filters and 3 pumps were operational, and crews worked to install 2 temporary bypass pumps. Mayor Avula called for residents to keep conserving water so that Bird Park Reservoir could fill up. Before we continue this story, let me pause just long enough to say that if you have any questions about Richmond or its housing market, my number's on the screen. Feel free to text or call anytime. And if you find this video helpful, feel free to hit the subscribe button. With that said, let's get back in the water. Thursday, January 9th. By Thursday morning, most of the city again had running water, but it was not yet drinkable. By 11 a.m., the reservoir was full, and all 9 of the city's water zones were now pressurized. This had to be achieved before the water could be tested. And 2 separate water tests, using samples collected 16 hours apart, had to come back clean before the boil water advisory could be lifted. The first round of water testing started at 3 p.m. Samples were monitored for 24 hours for chlorine levels and bacteria growth. Friday, January 10th. the fourth full day of the crisis. The Virginia National Guard provided help with water distribution that day. A second round of water testing began at 1 p.m. And at 3:30 p.m., officials announced that the city had passed its first round of testing. Saturday, January 11th. At 11:30 a.m., city officials announced that it had passed the second round of water testing, and the boil water advisory was officially lifted. At noon, Mayor Avola held a press conference and proceeded to chug a glass full of city tap water. At the same time, he announced that the city would conduct an independent investigation into what had happened. The water crisis is over, but it's sobering to reflect on the many ways it affected Richmond for those 6 days. At least 4 of the area's hospitals had to send patients elsewhere because of the crisis. Because 10 of the city's public schools rely on boilers for heat, the entire school system had to remain closed throughout the crisis, extending the holiday break by another week. Many parents felt like they were reliving COVID all over again. Richmond is the state capital and home of Virginia's General Assembly. It was scheduled to convene on Wednesday, but had to delay until Monday. Many small businesses and restaurants were closed during the week. Portions of central and eastern Henrico County, which usually use Richmond City's water supply, also experienced a loss of water or water pressure. And Mayor Danny Avula's inauguration festivities, which were scheduled for Saturday, had to be postponed while he focused on the crisis. To keep the water metaphor going, I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I'm naturally optimistic. So despite the major disruptions and challenges that this crisis caused, I see several reasons to think it had a silver lining. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin says the state legislature has started having conversations about funding for Richmond's aging infrastructure. One of the city's plants is over 100 years old, and in 2022, a federal audit cited Richmond with various violations, including aged filters and crumbling pumps. The Richmond Times-Dispatch reported that for over 8 years, the city put off replacing the switch that failed on Monday morning. This crisis could just be the tipping point that forces the city and the state to take action on some long, unresolved issues. Another positive is that city officials are exploring ways the city can support small businesses that were affected by the crisis, and also how to tap into state and federal funds to help other individuals who lost income. Mayor Avola has promised a comprehensive, transparent investigation. And finally, the water crisis spotlighted a lot of great neighbors. There's nothing like a crisis to bring community together. I served one morning at a water distribution center on Hull Street. There were about a dozen of us there, women and men, black and white, young and old, the haves and have-nots. It was inspiring to see this mixed group come together and, despite the cold, enjoy serving our neighbors. If I have to boil water for a few days in order to experience this sweet gift of community, I'll take it. Well, thanks for wading into Richmond's water crisis with me. I hope you can see that despite the real challenges, the city and its residents are working hard to make things better. If you're thinking about the possibility of making this your community, reach out to me. I'd be honored to help you find your perfect place here in Richmond.